So, Ajahn, what should you do when the Ajahn late? He's supposed to be here at 3:15 and he doesn't get here till 3:30. You should ask him to apologize. I apologize. Next question. Dear Ajahn, can you speak a little about your thoughts on dependent origination? Specifically, the difference between a subject-object view of causality versus a time period view. Present causes and conditions lead to future effects. I'm having a bit of a debate with someone about this, and another viewpoint might be helpful. When I was on Tudong in India a couple of months ago, and just having Dhamma discussions or questions with some of the monks, and we divide the questions into two types, two categories. It's like before coffee and after coffee questions. So this is kind of an after coffee question. Okay, so the Paticca Samuppada is the Buddha's masterpiece teaching, and quite difficult to understand, obviously. Only I went to pay my respects one year to Lumpu Ted, one of Lumpu Man's great disciples, and I told him one of my friends has asked a question, whether you could explain about the Paticca Samuppada. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. He said, waste of time, only arahants can understand Paticca Samuppada. There's a short version of Paticca Samuppada, which is called Idappaccayata, which is a little bit easier when with this as condition, then that as result. In other words, Paticca Samuppada, or in its short version, Idappaccayata, is an examination of causality and the causes and conditions behind phenomena. So there are two different ways of looking at Paticca Samuppada. There's sort of the, when we call the commentarial view, and then it's the Abhidhamma view. In summary, the Paticca Samuppada is not always, but most commonly explained in terms of 12 factors. And in this first interpretation model, then we divide these 12 links on a temporal basis, meaning first two links are taken to refer to events in a previous life, and then you have all those in the present life and then the future life. So it's used as a model to explain rebirth, or as a model which incorporates the teaching of rebirth. The Abhidhamma commentary and modern commentators, particularly in Thailand, Ajahn Buddhadasa, prefer to look on the 12 links as being present in every moment of experience, or in every in this life, and something that can be seen and recognized in this life. And there's something of a debate between the two views, and I think that they can both live together. There's no need to choose one over the other. In the interpretation of the Paticca Samuppada, which refers specifically to this life, then the key link, which is referred to as the basis for meditation practice, is the link between vedana, or feeling, and tanha, or craving. So once craving is present, then all the other links are present. And this is not a like this leads to that, to that, to that. It's not a temporal progression in that way. That's why it's so difficult to understand. But here at least we can say, at the moment of sense contact, or phassa, the eye sees a form, ear hears a sound, and so on, there is always a feeling. That's just the nature of things. That's nothing to do with mindfulness, wisdom, lack of it. There is, whether it's an ordinary unenlightened person or an arahant, there is always a feeling present at every moment of existence. And there are only three feelings. So we call sukha vedana, dukkha vedana, sukhama dukkha vedana, or pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, and neutral feeling. I recently read something in which the author says that use of the word feeling can be rather misleading in English because we use the word feeling to experience. So, for instance, we say, I feel anxious, we mean I am experiencing anxiety, or there is anxiety. And so I like the modern, quite recent tendency to translate Vedana as feeling tone. It's the tone of experience. And so there is always a tone of experience. So again, some people find this difficult, and the author of this short teaching suggested another analogy of taste, and saying we can speak about sweet, bitter, and neutral or bland taste. So every experience has a sweet, a bitter, or a bland taste to it. So this is an analogy, just a way of thinking about Vedana. Or we can say, right now, is this experience one which you would like to continue, or you would like to end, or you don't mind either way? This is pointing again to experience of Vedana. Anyway, the teaching here is that Vedana arises for everyone. But the unenlightened being, lacking mindfulness at the moment of phassa or contact, reacts to Vedana with tanha or craving. So with pleasant feeling, sweet feeling, grasps onto it. With bitter feeling, pushes away. And with neutral feeling, sort of a dull state of not really knowing what it is and hovering around it a bit, or ignoring it altogether, and thus being open to delusion of various kinds. Anyway, with the practice of mindfulness and the development of Dhamma, at the moment of Vedana, there is the recognition of sukha vedana, dukkha vedana, sukhama dukkha vedana, sukhama dukkha vedana, sweet feeling is sweet feeling, bitter feeling is bitter feeling, bland feeling is bland feeling. And so tanha does not arise at that moment. So the analogy is given like a chain, and this is the weak link of the chain. You cut the chain between Vedana and tanha. There's no other link which is vulnerable in that way. In other words, you cannot create you cannot break the link between craving and upadana or attachment. These things are inseparable. They're just one and the same thing, basically. So back to the question, in practical terms, this is a good way of in incorporating teachings of Paticca Samuppada into daily life practice. But the interpretation of three life model is worth studying and has a venerable history, and many very wise people are happy with that interpretation. May I ask for some advice on leaving a will? What is the best way? How can we help our children in the wise way for leaving the money and all? Many thanks. Do it today. That's my best first advice. Don't put it off. If you know any family in which the wife has been left because the husband didn't ever want to get round to writing a will, and how much suffering and pain it adds to the grief of bereavement, you would see the wisdom in getting a will made straight away. A living will is now very popular, and there are forms that you can find for living wills which contain advice as to your wishes should you be in hospital and unable to express yourself because of injury or illness or technology, whether you want, to what extent you want your life extended through the marvels of medical science, and what extent you would like to leave the world in a more natural way. These living wills, I think, are also very, very good, very important. How can we help our children in the wise way for leaving the money and all? I'm not quite sure I understand that, but I think just generally as a Dhamma teaching for ourselves and for children is really revolves around looking more closely at the nature of happiness and what makes us happy, and what role money plays in providing happiness. Does it really play as large a role as we think? And so not telling children, that money's everything, or that money's nothing, or just enough to meet your needs. It's more effective if you encourage children to investigate for themselves, and you can even, look up many studies, United Nations studies, many educational institutions have produced studies comparing income and rise in income to levels of satisfaction and happiness. And the overall summary I would give is that without security with regards to what we call the four requisites of food, shelter, clothing, medication, maybe we would add these days education. Without security in those areas of life, there can be no real happiness and no real spiritual progress. And this is why the Buddha, besides the chief role of a government or of a king, is to ensure that everyone in the kingdom, in the country, has access to the four requisites. But once you have sufficient wealth to secure yourself in regards to, and your family in regards to the four requisites, then the relationship between increase in income, increase in wealth, and happiness is no longer so clear-cut. As long as you don't have those four requisites, it's very clear the more money you have, the more happy you are generally. But once you go beyond that insecurity, then it's hardly any correlation at all between having, a million and 100 million or whatever it might be. So, we can be really scientific about it as well, and not saying, oh yeah, this is what monks say and this is what people who don't live in the real world say. There are a lot of so-called real world studies that point to the fact that money and wealth is a condition for happiness, but it's not a cause of it, and it can lead to unhappiness as often as happiness. So the question is, how wise are you in the use of your wealth, and how should wealth be used to produce maximum amounts of happiness and contentment in your life of those you love, and the community that you live in. So bringing up the question of money and not being superstitious and gullible, and just believing all of the propaganda that we're subjected to in a capitalist society about the value of money, looking clearly for yourself. And then I think that just lead on naturally to ideas of what would you do with excess wealth that you haven't used, and who you'd give it to, and how you distribute it, and how much you'd give to your kids, and how much you'd give to other worthy recipients. Ajahn, how can one undoubtedly believe in rebirth when one can't see past lives? Well, you can't. Yes, I have to disappoint you on that one. That's the whole point. That we, as Buddhists, one of the most important teachings of the Buddha occurs in sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya called Chunky Sutta. It's about 100 and something, 103, 104, something like that. And in the sutta, the point the Buddha makes is that no matter how that, let me rephrase that, unshakable faith in a doctrine does not prove that it must be true. You can believe 100% in false things. I don't think that anyone can really refute that system, even if you have a very strong faith in your religion's teachings. Then that would imply that you believe that people who have 100% faith in other religions have faith in false things, and they think the same about you. So this was a revolutionary teaching, and way before its time. Religions both before and after Buddhism have never really grasped this point, I don't think. And in many religious groups, there is circular logic here. It's true because I believe it. Or why do you believe it? Because it's true. It's true because I believe it because it's true. And this is why religions are always at each other's throats, because of this basic logical fallacy. Of course, we can unreservedly, undoubtedly believe in things which are not true. Therefore, we should always take our faith with a pinch of salt. So in the case of rebirth, then the influence of Western ways of thinking and looking at religion lead people to see the teaching on rebirth as a Buddhist dogma or a Buddhist doctrine. And it's like the keynote doctrine. So people say, oh, you're a Buddhist, you believe in reincarnation. It's like that's your keynote teaching. And that's what you have your faith in. But as I have repeated so many occasions, Buddhism is not a belief system. religion. It's an education system, religions, different family, different species of religion. It's not based on faith in dogmas. So if someone says to me, says to you, oh, you're a Buddhist, you believe in reincarnation, don't you? And you say, yes, I do. Actually, I don't know whether there is rebirth, really. But I've taken this teaching on trust. So there is this humble recognition that we don't actually know, but we are content to take the teaching on out of trust or as a working hypothesis. Because the Buddha says in the in teachings on right view or samadhi that taking on the concept or the view of rebirth is conducive to practice, to progress in Dhamma. And believing that there is no rebirth, believing in annihilation, for example, that after you die, that's the end of everything, is obstructive to progress in Dhamma. Now, my approach to this topic of rebirth maybe can explain with an analogy. Say you were born in a very flat land, like on the prairies of North America or Holland or somewhere like that, super flat, no mountains, just some small hills. And you find yourself blown away like Dorothy in Wizard of Oz, and find yourself in a strange land. But someone has given you a map. And so, well, can you trust this map? Well, there's only one way to find out. You start walking along, and the map says you are here, so you walk along, and you look to the left, and you look to the right, and the left says about a kilometer that way, there's a village of about so many houses. Yes, and over to the right, there's a forest. Yeah, there's a forest. Or there's a bog, or there's quicksand. And every single feature that is marked on the map that you can see as you walk along is accurate. So after a certain distance, you start to have trust in this map. This is a reliable map. This is not superstition. This is a conclusion drawn from the fact that there are so many different features that you have put to the test, and they've all been completely accurate. So you cannot say, therefore, this whole map is accurate in every detail, but it seems probable that it is so. And then you walk on some more, and yes, more and more reasons to trust in the map. And then you sit down, you think, have a rest, and open up. So it's one of these old maps. This is not a digital map. So open up. You remember those maps, like maps like this, and and you see something called a mountain. Goodness, what's a mountain? You grew up in Iowa or somewhere like that, and it says these mountains are like 5,000 meters high, and you can't imagine it, because you've only ever seen like a hill, which is like, I don't know, 100 meters or something. So it's beyond your powers of imagination. So everything in you says, that's not possible. But then this other voice says, yeah, but is it really likely that all the areas of the map that you've traversed are all completely accurate, and this would be so completely inaccurate? Well, there's a 1 in 100 chance, maybe. But it seems much more likely that there is something called a mountain, and it's that high, it's simply out of the realm of things that I have personal experience of. So let's keep walking. So this very long, involved analogy, I hope you can follow what I'm talking about here is when you're practicing the Dhamma, starting off with basic things like the joy that comes from giving, the self-respect, the trust and warmth that arises in families through keeping precepts and so on and so forth. And yes. So you're constantly ticking these off. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that's so true. And things you don't expect. And you think, yeah, that's exactly what the Buddha said. So you get this real sense the Buddha knows what he's talking about. Okay. And then you come across his teachings, the Buddha, about rebirth. And that's like the mountains that the person who's born on a flat land. It's like, what? Come on, that's like a story. It's like a mythology or something like that, because that's your frame of reference. But then you think, yeah, but is it likely that the Buddha was so wise and so insightful about everything that I've experienced so far on this path and could be so completely wrong about that? So that's the logic, inferential path to confidence in rebirth, based upon trust in the Buddha's wisdom and the fact that he spoke about these things at some length, and even said that not believing blindly in their existence, but taking on the idea of them and as a working hypothesis, at least, is a intelligent thing to do for someone who wants to follow the Eightfold Path. Now, another, for me, really convincing support for belief in rebirth is the recollection of past lives by children. And I've spoken about this before also, and then the work of the department in the University of Virginia in the United States, where they have a group of scientists who are not, I don't think, any of them Buddhists, but they're investigating this, been investigating this for some 20, 30 years now. And you can imagine, given the way in which the majority of the scientific community would look upon this kind of research, they had to be like super rigorous. So there's not even a possibility that someone's going to pick holes in it and make fun. And so now, after all this time, they have 2,500, 600 cases, very well documented cases of children remembering past lives and giving information which does not make, you just cannot explain in any other way. So this makes many people feel very uncomfortable, and a common resort is, oh no, I'm a scientist, I don't. So I think the response here is, okay, that's all right. We can talk on the scientific plane. This is the data. This is my interpretation of the data. Our interpretation of the data is this child is remembering a past life. This child is able to give detailed information about life in a family in another part of a country, which neither he or any member of his family has ever been to. He's able to talk about roads that no longer exist and houses that were long demolished and and things that he couldn't have heard about. And so the skeptical arguments about things become really kind of ridiculous. But I think that if you say, okay, you don't accept the hypothesis of rebirth as an explanation of this data, then I think, from my understanding of scientific debate, you have to be able to produce an alternative hypothesis or a superior hypothesis. You can't just say, I don't like your hypothesis, because it challenges everything that I believe in my life. So we have the words of the Buddha. We have and you can look this up on, there are books been written with a number of these cases. There's YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff you can read about, watch. And forgot just now the monks and nuns and meditators who've developed very high powers, profound samadhi, and have memory of past lives. Again, for monks and nuns, in Theravada world particularly, don't like to talk about these things. And the Buddha didn't want monks to be talking about this stuff too much. But when monks are pressed or do speak about these things, they monks together, for instance, then again, you can, there are two possibilities, aren't there? Or three possibilities. One, the monk's telling the truth. He does have a memory of past lives. Secondly, he's lying. Third, he's deluded. There has to be one of those three, doesn't it? So I think in the case of well-practiced monks, we can more or less discard the lying possibility. So he's either having an authentic recollection of past lives or it's some delusion. And here you don't know. But if it's someone who, again, who you've seen with great integrity and wisdom and compassion, then you tend to want to give him the benefit of the doubt, although you recognize it's not proof. One last thing is recollection of lives under hypnosis, and that's really fun if you've ever listened to any tape transcripts of people remembering lives. And I listened to one once where there was this like rather posh Englishman talking like that. And he went into hypnosis, and his voice changed into like a farmer's kind of slang from 200 years ago, and he recalled being on a ship in a war and having his leg blown off, and it's so realistic. It's a kind of awful thing to hear. But anyway, if that's not a remembrance of past lives, then what is it? So, in summary, I would say that there is 4 particular things that are strong supports for belief in rebirth. One is the Buddha's teachings and our trust in his wisdom, compassion. Secondly, similarly with great monks and nuns and meditators. Thirdly, modern day evidence of children all over the world, not only in Buddhist or Hindu cultures, remembering past lives in great detail. And fourthly, people remembering past lives under hypnosis. So we can say, yes, I believe in rebirth for these reasons, for these supporting reasons, but I don't know. And we are the religion. We are the only religion. We can be very proud of this. We don't have any shame about saying, I don't know. Yeah. We don't know it all. Yeah, I don't know. You can say that. So if you want to know if it's a Buddhist, there's someone who's proud to admit that, not actually proud, but willing to admit that there are certain things they don't know, but they're taking on trust for the time being. How can one differentiate between whether one needs more sleep or is it laziness when deciding whether to go back to sleep upon waking up? I find it hard to get out of bed at times when I'm not in retreat. I think it's good to experiment a little about as regards how many hours of sleep we need. I think when we're younger, of course, like 8 hours, I think is a good standard. But everyone's different, everyone's needs are different, and it may be that you don't need quite so much sleep as you take. I mean, 8 hours a day, that's a third of your life. You just think about that. If you're 60 years old, you've slept away 20 of them. Yeah, that's quite stunning kind of reflection, isn't it? And so if, for instance, you could function well on 7.5 hours, then you have a half hour for meditation in the morning. So, that can, for people who feel they don't have enough time for meditation, busy life, then that's one thing I would recommend. Just experiment a little bit. If you really feel less than 8 hours, you feel groggy, mind's not so clear, and sleepy during the day, and so on and so forth, then 8 hours is what you need, or maybe even more than that, who knows. But don't take it as a given. It's not like a biological necessity for all human beings. It's more like a general average, I think. So once you have a sense of how much sleep you need, then if you wake up, then just look at the clock. If it's if you need, your body needs 8 hours, and you wake up after 2 hours, then probably it's okay to go back to sleep. But if it's morning, and you wake up, and it's a mindfulness practice as well. What's the mental state there? It's like, nah, I'm not ready for a new day. I want a bit more oblivion. So this sort of desire for oblivion, that's probably not a good thing to follow. And if you dream, we notice like dreams in the middle of the night are like one thing, but if you dream in the morning before you get up, that usually means that you're sleeping too much. Because it's like your body is ready to get up, but you don't let it get up. So it's this energy, and it manifests as a dream. And dreams before you get up tend to be not very good dreams, so dreaming is but getting up in the middle of the night, that's as you get older, gentlemen, then that's becomes quite a normal thing, and usually all right to go back to sleep again after going to the bathroom. But be interested in how much sleep you need and experiment a little bit, is my advice. Do you believe in soulmates? Can you please give me advice on how to check a life partner? Well, okay. So in Thailand, this is a big, everywhere, I guess. And I don't have an argument with the idea of a soulmate. I have an idea of the argument how you, what you do when you meet a soulmate. Because the idea is you meet a soulmate and that's it, soulmate, get married, have kids, live happily ever after. But for me as a Buddhist, I would say if you meet a soulmate, you say, let's call it quits, okay? We so many lifetimes now, and it's not really worked out. Let's make a fresh start. You go your way and I'll go mine. So for someone to be a soulmate, meaning, being a husband and wife, or you had a strong connection over a number of lifetimes in that way, then it's dependent on an equivalence of certain virtues, faith, sila, jhaka, or generosity, and panya. So if you're keeping 5 precepts and you have very strong bond, love, and you have equivalent levels of faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, generosity and wisdom, then there's possibility that you'll meet in another life, next life. Can you please give me advice on how to choose a life partner? Probably not the best person to give this advice. I think, what do I think? I think, first of all, be a good friend to yourself first. I think that the best relationships are based on friendship and making your goal to be a good friend and to cultivate good friends. And from what I've seen of healthy, long-term marriages, then it's friendship which is the bedrock. And when you're young, of course, the sensual and sexual side is more to the fore, but that's not sustainable for most people with the same intensity as you get older. But what becomes the refuge and what provides the true happiness is that sense of friendship and helping each other, both in worldly and spiritual goals, in realizing. So it's finding somebody who has the same level, same approach to ethics and morality and sila, someone who keeps 5 precepts and shares the same goals and values and aspirations. Those are the 2 main things. And as I say, this determination to create the very best possible friendship. Kindness is key. You mentioned that it is important to notice the gaps between thoughts. Could you please elaborate? How does this practice help us understand our mind and free it from attachment and wrong views? Is this gap an object of mind, and so doesn't this make it a thought? Okay. So identification with thinking is a very strong obstacle to progress in Dhamma, and the taking thinking and intelligence as an identity means that samadhi can be quite threatening because you have to relinquish thought to enter samadhi. So if your idea of who you are and what makes you special or unique, an idea is how smart you are and your thinking mind, then that's going to be a real conflict. So looking at that quite closely, especially if you have to use your mind a lot in your job, your career, or you've been very successful using your thinking mind, then letting go of it is like feel almost like suicide. So there's a lot of fear and resistance to that. To deal with that, just to sort of gently deal with that, is to observe that even in a busy thinking mind, there are a lot of gaps between thoughts. But it's like stepping stones over a river. You don't notice the gaps between the stepping stones. And the gaps between thoughts are invisible to most people. You say, "Oh, I've been thinking. I can't stop thinking all day." No, if you look a bit more closely, it's not exactly true. You're thinking, and there's a short gap, and then you think again. So there is the possibility of gaps, and at the end of every exhalation, every out breath, there tends to be a small gap with no thought. That's something to be mindful of. So the idea is observing the gaps between thoughts, and you can exercises out in the world, like here, looking at the gaps between trees and the gaps between people, and it's just an exercise that I developed over many years, noticing the gaps. And then you can be more comfortable, and then you can expand the gaps in thinking, and become, and that can become a way of weaning yourself away from attachment to thoughts, just very, very gradually and gently. So how does it help us to understand our mind? Well, because we're seeing that thought is not who we are. It's not an identity, and views and thoughts. These are all views and are composed of thoughts, and so we begin to see thought as more kind of wispy and insubstantial. It's not such a really big deal anymore. You still have thoughts going through your mind, but the subjective experience of thought changes. And gradually you can move on to a sense where your default is not thinking. You can think, but the default is not thinking about something, anything at all, just to fill in the gap. But there is a contentment with absence of thought, clarity of mind, and absence of thought. And it's a very pleasant abiding. Is this gap an object of mind? Yeah, I guess so, isn't it? It's something you're aware of. I'm not so keen on this kind of investigation. Doesn't it make it a thought? Well, technically, what does a thought mean? If we are defining thought to include some kind of ideation or some kind of words or image, then we could say no. But if we think of thought as any kind of movement in the mind, yes, still no. I think not. I don't think I would consider it a thought, but it is a mental state, let's say. Dear Ajahn, thank you for your teaching. Can you advise how to do death contemplation? I often do it and bring to mind shortness of life and the good deeds I have done, but the mind will say, I'm ready to die, but it is a pity I am not Sotapanna yet. There is still attachment. Yes, you can. There are a number of reflections. So, excuse me. One way of talking about meditation, divide them into discursive and non-discursive meditations. So a non-discursive meditation means no thinking, like contemplate, looking at the breath going in, breath going out. There's no thinking involved. But reflection on death or investigating the 32 parts of the body, the 4 elements, you start off using the thinking mind, but in a very disciplined way. You give it very clear-cut boundaries and say, okay, mind, you want to think, go ahead, think, but think within this box, think only on this theme. So rather than the discipline being of maintaining focus on a sensation or a word, it's their focus on a theme or a concept or an idea of some kind. So with death meditation, it can be everybody dies, Okay, so that's your theme. And then you can elaborate on that. Everybody who's ever lived has died. Every man, every woman has died. Old people, young people, babies. So you can use your mind, you thinking, elaborating, but it doesn't lead to agitation because it's within these very clearly defined limits. Death is certain. The time of death is uncertain. Okay, that's another big theme. Yeah, time of death is uncertain. So we don't know. Are we all going to be here tomorrow? We don't know. We think so, but we don't know. We have no guarantees at all. And not only us, but all the people that we love and whose life has meaning for us, they could die at any time. And we can all think of cases of people who have died suddenly. There's a monk, Jokun Mongkon, old friend of mine, friends for 30 years. He went to India last month, took a group of people to pay respects in the temple, Mahabodhi temple in Bodh Gaya, went back to his hotel, had a heart attack and was dead within half an hour or an hour after having no previous symptoms at all. So this is, it's unusual, but it's not shocking. Yeah, we all know stories like this. We can. Anybody can. And so the uncertainty of time of death and the uncertainty of the mode of death, how are we going to die? Are we going to die suddenly? To die from a long lingering illness, a painful illness, an unpainful illness? So many different possibilities. We don't know. No idea. So we can bring this sense of death to bring it to life, if you like, through this kind of contemplation and having maybe 3 or 4, 5 of these themes, and to go. And so you go over this theme and you can think about it, and maybe a particular aspect of the theme is powerful for you. But when you kind of run out of steam and feel you're repeating yourself too much, you go on to the next one, and similarly on to the next one. And then there'll be a point when you just feel too much contemplation. Then the mind's ready to go into calm and into looking at the breath, for example. But the most important feature of the death meditation is making it personal to you. I am going to die. So the Pali for this is Maranang me bhavisati. So this can be like a mantra. Maranang me bhavisati. Death is coming for me. I am going to die. At the end, the author of this question says, the mind says, I'm ready to die, but it's pity I'm not Sotapanna yet. Excuse me. That's not a really wrong view or attachment. That actually can be a source of wisdom. Yeah, I could die at any time, and I still not realized Sotapanna. So I'm still in the danger zone. I have no guarantees for what will happen after I die. The only person who's safe out of the war zone is the Sotapanna. So that sense, I'm ready to die, but I want to, if possible, realize stream entry first. I don't think that's like a deluded way of thinking. It's quite a wise way of thinking if it leads to urgency in practice. In your experience, what are the most common problems that lay people tend to seek your guidance on? Is there a theme? What teachings of the Buddha you found to be key to solving the bulk of these problems? Do you know, I've answered so many questions, and so many. So I guess the most common problems are 3 main problems: greed, hatred, and delusion. They all fall into those three boxes. I do notice some, like the number of people who ask for advice on how to deal with anger exceeds to a great degree the number of people who ask for advice on how to let go of greed. People not so interested in learning how to let go of greed as they are of anger. And what teachings of the Buddha you found to be key? I don't think that there's any one particular teaching. The teachings of Buddha are so vast and so comprehensive and so rich that it's more a matter of grounding oneself in the teachings and living the teachings, and to the degree that when a question comes, then there is a sense of which of the Buddha's teachings is most appropriate to that particular question. So same question, two different people might give two different answers. Sometimes people ask a question and it's not what they really want to ask, or there's a question behind the question, or a question behind the question behind the question. So don't always answer the question anyway. Okay, just one more. Talk too much. What is stream entry? In science, so I'm not a science, I'm going to show myself up here, but I heard things like quantum leaps. And for me, this means that there's a kind of a steady progression and then a leap, which is not obvious that it will take place given what's happened before. Or let's say like crystallization, something like that. So in the practice of Dhamma, you have this like gradual development, and then you reach a certain point and there's like a quantum leap. And that first quantum leap is called stream entry. And why I call it quantum leap or compare it is that through realization of stream entry, the Buddha says the gates to the lower realms are closed. So in the cycle of rebirth, in all the different realms of rebirth, one who has realized stream entry will never again be born in a lower realm of being. So that's why I just said this is like the safety, the place of safety. And that without that, you have no guarantees, even if this lifetime you're leading a moral life. In future, you can't guarantee that you won't ever fall into a lower realm being till you realize stream entry. Stream entry is also a guarantee that within at most 7 lives, you will realize Nibbana. So this is the source of this analogy of stream. So then if Nibbana is like the ocean, you've entered the stream and now you're flowing down inexorably to the ocean. The experience of stream entry is defined, and indeed the other levels of enlightenment is defined by the Buddha in terms of the abandonment of certain defilements and certain kinds of delusion, misunderstanding. So the stream enterer abandons 3 these defilements, which are called sangyojana or fetters. So fetters like chains that bind you to samsara. And of these 3, the key one is the attachment to the idea or the belief of the body and mind as self, being an independent, self-existent, permanent entity. And that view is abandoned, is exposed by insight into the 3 characteristics of anicca, dukkha, anatta, through vipassana, which is based upon samadhi, which is based upon sati, mindfulness. Now, together with this fetter, the two auxiliary fetters are abandoned. The first is doubt, skeptical doubt about, well, what really is the practice? Is there really such a thing as enlightenment? Are the Buddhist teachings really true? Are they really? Is it really possible to realize the Dhamma in this day and age, and so on? So all these doubts fall away once that first fetter has been abandoned, and you see the truth for yourself. And thirdly, there's the Silabhata Paramasa, which is in older translations it's translated as attachment to rites and rituals, but it means to attachment to particular practices and observances and techniques and particular ways of doing things, and giving them too much importance. When you're getting obsessed with a particular technique, you have to use this this is the only technique, for instance. Or say thinking you're purified through vegetarianism or veganism or whatever, or monks who only eat one meal a day are more pure than monks who eat twice a day, or walking barefoot is will purify your mind. And all these different kinds of practices, which in and of themselves may be quite helpful to practice, but too much emphasis is put on them, and the causes and conditions for stream entry or an enlightenment reveal to the stream enterer. And so the wrong views and the wrong attributions of importance to various practices falls away. So that's stream entry. As I came late, I'll answer one more question. Could you please share us how you decided to ordain with Ajahn Chah as your preceptor? So I left England in 1975 at the age of 17 and traveled overland to India and spent a year in India and several months in Iran and Afghanistan and various places. And in India, particularly, pursued studies of Buddhism and Eastern religions and Mahayana, Vajrayana, Theravada. And by the time I got back to England after 2 years had elapsed, the question is what I'm going to do with my life. I realized I didn't want to go to university. I was expected to go to university. A gap year had turned into 2 years, and then I had to tell my parents it was never going to go to university. That's another story. And then I realized, well, I want to commit myself to study and practice of Dhamma, and reviewing all my experiences of practice so far. I think, yes, it's the Theravada school, which suits me the best. And I had heard during my travels on a number of occasions about an English monk in Thailand who people found very inspiring. And at about the time I left India, he disrobed, and by that time he had many students. And he went back to England and established a meditation center, and he and his students just tried to develop a Dhamma community. So they would, during the day, they would go and work as carers in old people's homes and doing things benefit to the society, and they would have morning and evening meditations together and regular retreats. So I signed up for one of these retreats, 10-day retreat, and it was wonderful. And during the evening talks, the teacher would often tell stories about his life as a forest monk in Thailand, and I thought, yeah, this is it. This is exactly what I've been searching for the last 2 years. That was when I really decided that that was the path to go to Thailand, become a forest monk. I made a friend on this retreat, and was going backwards and forwards to this place over the next few months. My friend told me that there were some monks, Western forest monks from Thailand, who were in London at the moment and were looking for a place to establish a forest monastery in England, and that I should go and ask for some advice, and that made sense to me. So I hitchhiked down to London and went to what's called the Haverstock Hill Buddhist Vihara, the Dhamma Padipa it was called. And that's where I met Lumpur Sumedho for the first time, and ended up spending a few days there in the Hampstead Vihara, and heard about Rains Retreat. I didn't know what a Wasa or Rains Retreat was, and the monks were all going off into the countryside to spend a few months. And one of the monks, some of you will know him, Lumpur Wiradhammo, was there at that time. This is 1978. And he said, well, if you're going to Thailand, best time to go is like November, December, when it's a bit cool. If you go in May, June, which was what it was then, it's going to be hot and sticky. And why don't you spend the Rains Retreat with us and go afterwards? So I said, yeah, okay. So what? And then the piece of the property in Oxfordshire was being offered for the use of the Sangha by very wealthy Burmese lay supporter. But he was also, quite frankly, hoping to make some money out of it, because he was he said that lay people could go and practice with the Sangha, but they had to pay. And it was like, this is 1978, so it was £8 a night. I can still remember this, which I would be equivalent to like £50 a night these days, something like that. I didn't have any money, so I thought, oh, that's... And then Ajahn B said, never mind, you can go as a pakao, as an anagarika. And I said, then you won't have to pay. I said, what's that? He said, well, all you do is you shave your head, you keep precepts, wear white. And I said, that's all. I said, yeah, okay, go for it. And so the anagarikas in those days, they didn't wear sabong, they were trousers. So I had to find some white trousers. And one of my friend's dad was the owner of a fish and chip shop. And in the fish and chip shop, they wear these white uniforms. So I went and asked if, can I borrow one of a couple of pairs of your dad's white fish and chip shop trousers? And so that was my pakao uniform. So while I was in Oakenholt, this place just outside Oxford, then of course there's a big picture of Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Sumedho's talking about Ajahn Chah all the time, and Ajahn Viradhammo's talking about Ajahn Chah, and everything is, and so of course I'm absolutely fascinated and inspired, and that becomes my goal to go to Wat Pah Pong and to become a disciple of Ajahn Chah, which at the end of the Rains Retreat in 1978, I did. And I've been here ever since. Okay. So that's the end of the Q&A this afternoon. And okay. So you can bow and then...